I'm Alexa, 31, female, and my parents are taking me to court for buying a house. That isn't an exaggeration or a metaphor for a family argument. I'm talking about a real, legally filed lawsuit. With their names Richard and Susan listed as the plaintiffs and my name, Alexa, listed as the defendant. The cause: I finally achieved my life's singular goal. I bought a home. After 13 years of relentless grinding, of living a life so frugal it would make a monk look like a spendthrift, of subsisting on instant noodles and turning down every invitation that cost money, I finally owned a piece of this world. My reward for this Herculean effort wasn't a housewarming party or a proud hug. It was a thick manila envelope delivered by a process server. A document that effectively stated my success was not my own and that I owed them for it. To understand how a family gets to this point, you have to understand that in my family, there were always two worlds. There was the world my younger brother, Leo, lived in. And then there was mine. Leo's world was bright, sunny, and paved with parental support. My world was a place where I was expected to be self-sufficient from the moment I could tie my own shoes. The favoritism wasn't subtle, it was the bedrock of our family dynamic. A fact as solid and unchangeable as the foundation of the house. They were now trying to take from me. I remember one specific incident from when I was 18, just starting. At a community college, my decade-old laptop, a hand-me-down from a cousin, finally gave up. It wasn't a luxury, it was essential for my coursework. I had a part-time job, but my savings were paper-thin. I swallowed my pride and asked my parents, Richard and Susan, if they could possibly help me with a few $100s to buy a basic, refurbished machine. I had a whole speech prepared, complete with a budget showing how I'd pay them back. My father, Richard, didn't even look up from his newspaper. That's what your job is for, Alexa, he said, his tone suggesting I'd asked for a diamond necklace. Responsibility, you need to learn it. My mother, Susan, just gave me that familiar, tight-lipped smile that was her signature blend of pity and dismissal. He's right, dear, we can't just be handing out money. It wouldn't be fair. I was humiliated, but I did what I always did. I figured it out. I took on extra shifts, ate nothing but rice and beans for 2 months, and bought the laptop myself. The very next week, I came home to find a brand new car with a giant red bow on it sitting in the driveway. It was for Leo, a 16th birthday present. It wasn't a used sedan, it was a sporty coupe, the kind of car a teenager dreams of. When I stared at it, a hollow feeling echoing in my chest, my mother put her arm around Leo and said, loud enough for me to hear, a young man needs to have the right tools to build his confidence. Apparently, a laptop for a college student wasn't one of those tools. This pattern repeated itself endlessly. My achievements were met with polite, almost indifferent nods. I graduated from my IT program with honors. Oh, that's nice, dear. I got my first full-time job as an IT support specialist. Good, now you can really start saving. There was never any praise, only the expectation that I would perform my duties as a responsible, independent adult. Leo's life was the complete opposite. He was the creative one, the entrepreneur. His ideas, no matter how flimsy, were celebrated as strokes of genius. When he was 22, he decided he was going to launch a line of artisanal, handcrafted dog collars. My parents didn't just encourage him. They gave him $20,000 of their savings as seed money. The business, predictably, failed within a year, the money vanishing into a puff of poor planning and expensive materials. Did he have to get a job to pay them back? Of course not. According to my parents, it was a valuable learning experience. When I, at 25, was working 60-hour weeks between my main job and freelance IT gigs, saving every penny, my parents would comment on my lifestyle. You need to live a little, Alexa, my mother would say, looking at my simple clothes. It's not healthy to be so obsessed with money. This, while they were actively funding Leo's gap year to find himself in Southeast Asia, the irony was so thick I could barely breathe. I wasn't obsessed with money, I was obsessed with freedom. The freedom that comes from not having a safety net. The freedom that comes from knowing that if you fall, no one is going to catch you. So I built my own net. Thread by thread, dollar by dollar, for 13 long years. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I was on my own. I just never imagined that the people who put me there would be the ones to try and tear that net to shreds the moment it was finally finished. The 13-year grind was my life's defining chapter. It started when I was 18, sitting in my cramped dorm room, looking at my bank account, which contained less than $100. I saw my future stretching before me, and I could either be perpetually one emergency away from disaster, or I could take control. I chose control. My mantra was simple: need, not want. Before every single purchase, from a pack of gum to a new pair of socks, I would ask myself, Do I absolutely need this? Most of the time, the answer was no. My life became a masterclass in minimalism, not for aesthetic reasons, but out of brutal necessity. My friends in my early 20s were going out, traveling, dating, and experiencing life. I was working, my main job as an IT specialist paid the bills. But the real progress came from the side hustles. I repaired computers for people in my neighborhood, built websites for small businesses for a pittance, and took on any freelance tech support gig I could find. Sleep became a luxury. My diet consisted of a rotation of instant noodles, oatmeal, and eggs. I bought my clothes from thrift stores, my furniture was found on the curb, and my entertainment was the public library and free podcasts. There were moments of weakness. Of course, I remember standing outside a movie theater once, the smell of popcorn wafting out, listening to my friends' laughter inside. The price of a single ticket felt like an insurmountable luxury. It wasn't just the $10. It was what that $10 represented 100 more just like it that I needed to save. I turned around and went home to work on a freelance project, the feeling of isolation a cold weight in my stomach. My colleagues would talk about their vacations, their new cars, their weekend plans. I would just smile and nod, offering vague excuses. They probably thought I was boring or antisocial. The truth was, I had a secret, all-consuming passion, a savings account. Watching that number go up, penny by penny, was the most thrilling thing in my life. It was my validation, my security, my quiet rebellion against the world I had been born into. Years blurred together. My 20s passed in a montage of work, save, repeat. I saw my brother, Leo, flaunt a new designer watch, paid for by our parents. And I would go home and transfer another $50 into my high-yield savings account. That was my designer watch. He'd talk about his amazing brunch, and I would eat my meal-prepped chicken and rice and calculate the interest I'd earned that month. We were living in different universes. Finally, at the age of 31, the number I had been chasing for over a decade materialized on my screen. It was enough, not enough for a mansion, not enough for a flashy condo downtown, but enough for my house. The search was methodical. I wasn't looking for a dream home. I was looking for a smart investment, a solid roof over my head. I found it in a quiet, older neighborhood, a small, 2-bedroom bungalow with good bones and a tiny backyard. It was modest, unassuming, and utterly perfect. The day of the closing was surreal. I sat in a sterile office, signing a mountain of paperwork. With each signature, my hand trembled slightly. This was it, the culmination of 4,745 days of sacrifice. When the lawyer slid the keys across the table, I just stared at them for a full minute. They were plain, standard brass keys, but to me, they were the most beautiful things I had ever seen. I drove to my house and parked in my driveway. I walked to the front door, my heart pounding in my chest. The key slid into the lock. It turned. The click of the deadbolt retracting was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The house was empty, echoing with silence. Sunlight streamed through the living room window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I walked through each room, my footsteps loud on the hardwood floors. This was my kitchen, where I could cook real meals. This was my bedroom, where I could sleep soundly knowing I was safe. This was my backyard, where I could plant a garden. I leaned against a wall in the empty living room, slid down to the floor, and just let the tears come. They weren't tears of sadness or exhaustion. They were tears of pure, unadulterated relief. It was the feeling of a marathon runner crossing the finish line, of a prisoner tasting freedom. I had done it, against all odds, with no help from anyone. I had built this for myself. I was finally, unequivocally, home, and in that moment, in the quiet solitude of my very own house, I felt a sense of peace I had never known. It was a peace that I foolishly believed nothing and no one could ever take away. After a week of living in a state of blissful disbelief, sleeping on an air mattress, on the floor of my own bedroom, eating takeout pizza on my own kitchen counter, I decided it was time to tell my family. I knew they wouldn't throw me a party, but I still held onto a sliver of hope that they would see this achievement for what it was. That maybe, just for a moment, they would be proud of me. I invited them over for a Sunday lunch. It was a strategic move. I figured the neutrality of my new, empty house would be better than the tense environment of their home. I bought a lasagna from the grocery store, a celebratory splurge, and set up a folding table and some camping chairs in the dining area. They arrived right on time. My father, Richard, walked in first, his eyes scanning the room with a critical air, as if he were inspecting a property for its flaws. Needs a lot of work, he grunted, tapping a wall. Old plaster. My mother, Susan, followed, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Though, it's cozy, Alexa. Very practical for one person. Leo trailed behind them, scrolling through his phone. Looking utterly bored, is there Wi-Fi was the first thing he said. The optimistic bubble in my chest deflated, but I pushed on. I know it's a bit bare, I said with a cheerful laugh, but it's mine. I wanted you all to be the first to see it. I gave them the grand tour, which took all of 5 minutes. They walked through the small rooms with a distinct lack of enthusiasm. When I showed them the second bedroom, which I dreamed of turning into a home office, my mother's expression soured. 2 bedrooms is a lot for just you, she remarked. That's a lot of empty space. We sat down to eat at the wobbly folding table. I tried to keep the conversation light, talking about my plans for painting and my excitement about the neighborhood. They responded with one-word answers, their attention clearly elsewhere. Finally, I couldn't stand the tension anymore. So, what do you think? I asked, looking directly at them. I know it's not much, but I worked really hard for this. 13 years. There was a long, uncomfortable silence. My father put his fork down and looked at my mother. It was a look I knew well, a silent, strategic communication. Well, Alexa, my father began, his voice taking on a serious, almost condescending tone. It's a nice little house, but we need to talk about the timing of this. The timing? I asked, confused. What about the timing? Susan jumped in, her voice trembling with practiced fragility. Your father and we've had some financial setbacks. Dear, as you know, we've always tried to support Leo's ambitions. She glanced at Leo, who was now listening intently, a smug look on his face, and his latest venture, the app development company, required a significant investment. We thought it was a sure thing. It still is, Leo interjected defensively. We just need a little more runway. My father held up a hand to silence him. The point is, Alexa, we're in a bit of a tight spot. We've had to remortgage our house. We're stretched thin. I stared at them, a cold dread creeping up my spine. I knew where this was going. I had seen this play out 100 times. Always with Leo at the center, but I never imagined I would be dragged into the cast. I'm sorry to hear that, I said carefully, but what does that have to do with my house? My mother took a deep breath, her eyes welling up with crocodile tears. We were just so surprised you would make such a massive purchase without consulting us. Knowing the family is struggling, I repeated, my voice rising. You're struggling because you gave Leo another massive handout for a business that will probably fail. Just like the dog collars and the gourmet toast food truck. How is that my responsibility? That's not fair, Leo snapped. It's about family, Alexa. My father said, his voice hard as steel. Family helps each other, and frankly, this house is a solution. I blinked. A solution to what? And then came the demand. It was so audacious, so completely divorced from reality, that for a moment I thought I was hallucinating. We have 2 options, as we see it, my father said, leaning forward as if he were closing a business deal. Option 1, you sell the house, and the profits go to us to stabilize our finances and give Leo the capital he needs. We'll consider it a repayment for all the years of support we gave you. I gaped at him, speechless. The support they gave me? The roof over my head that they were legally obligated to provide a minor? Or, my mother added quickly, if you're too attached to the place. Option 2 is that we all move in, your father, myself, and Leo. You have a second bedroom, and the living room is large enough for a pull-out couch. It would be a temporary arrangement, of course, just until we're all back on our feet. The air left my lungs. They stood there, the 3 of them, a united front of entitlement, looking at me as if they had just offered the most reasonable proposal in the world. They weren't just asking for help, they were laying claim to my life's work. They saw my sanctuary, my symbol of freedom, and saw only a resource to be exploited, a solution to a problem they had created. I looked at their faces, my father's stern and demanding, my mother's pleading and manipulative, my brother's smug and expectant. The last, fragile thread of hope I had for our relationship snapped. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, it felt like a physical blow. They weren't proud of me, they didn't even see me, they just saw a bank. And I had just made a very large, very liquidable deposit. My initial shock curdled into a cold, hard rage. I stood up, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. The folding table wobbled precariously. No, I said. The word was quiet, but it landed in the center of the room with the force of a grenade. No, my father repeated, his eyebrows shooting up in disbelief. What do you mean, no? I mean no, I said, my voice gaining strength. No, I will not sell my house. No. You will not be moving in here. This is my home, mine, the one I bought with my money, which I earned through my work. It has absolutely nothing to do with you. Susan gasped dramatically, placing a hand over her heart. Alexa, how can you be so selfish? After everything we've done for you, everything you've done for me, I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You did the bare minimum required by law. You never supported me. You wouldn't help me buy a $200 laptop for college, but you handed him, I said. jabbing a finger toward Leo, tens of thousands of dollars to fund his parade of failures. You have no claim to this house, not a single dollar in it. Leo jumped to his feet. You're just jealous. You've always been jealous of me because mom and dad actually believe in my vision. I'm not jealous of you, Leo, I shot back. I pity you. You're 26 years old and you're still completely dependent on them. I've been on my own since I was 18. This house is proof of that. My father stood up, his face red with anger. That's enough. You are being an ungrateful child. We gave you an ultimatum. This is your family. You will help us. This isn't a family, I said, my voice shaking with the weight of a lifetime of hurt. It's a business. And I'm the only one who's ever been expected to turn a profit. The answer is no. I think you should all leave. The silence that followed was heavy and final. My mother started to cry, real tears this time, but they had no effect on me. I was numb. My father gave me a look of pure contempt, a look that said I was dead to him. He grabbed his coat, and without another word, they walked out. Leo gave me a final, sneering glare before slamming the door behind him. I stood alone in my empty house, the half-eaten lasagna sitting on the table like a bad omen. The joy and peace I had felt were gone, replaced by a churning sea of anger and betrayal. I spent the next few days in a fog of anxiety. I expected angry phone calls, manipulative text messages. What I got was silence. A week went by, then two. The silence was almost worse than the yelling. It was the calm before a storm I couldn't see coming. The storm broke on a Tuesday afternoon. I was working from home, finally feeling a semblance of normalcy when the doorbell rang. It was a man in a cheap suit holding a large manila envelope. Alexa, he asked. I nodded. You've been served. He handed me the envelope and walked away. I closed the door, my hands trembling. I knew what it was, but my mind refused to accept it. I sank onto the floor of my hallway and tore it open. The legal jargon was dense, but the names were horrifyingly clear. Richard and Susan, plaintiffs, via Alexa, defendant. I read the complaint, my vision blurring. They were suing me, my own parents. The claim was more insane than their initial demand. They alleged that we had a long-standing verbal agreement, that my financial success would be used to support the family. They claimed that my ability to save money was only possible due to the financial and emotional stability they provided during my upbringing, and as such, they were entitled to restitution. They were demanding a 50% stake in the value of my home. I felt like I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just a grab for money. It was an attempt to rewrite history. They wanted a court of law to validate their delusion that they were good, supportive parents and I was a cold, ungrateful debtor. My first instinct was despair. I thought about just giving in, selling the house, giving them the money, and disappearing. The idea of fighting my own parents in a public courtroom felt shameful and monstrous. The weight of it all was crushing me. That evening, I called my one true friend, Chloe. We had met at my first IT job and had been inseparable ever since. She was the only person who knew the full extent of my frugal lifestyle and the truth about my family. I sobbed uncontrollably as I told her what had happened. She listened patiently until I was finished. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was calm and firm. Okay, Alexa, first, you're going to stop crying. Second, you're going to get online and find the meanest, most aggressive family law attorney in the city. You are not giving those people a single red cent. You are not giving them your house. You are going to fight this, and you are going to win. But Chloe, they're my parents, I whispered. No, she said, her voice sharp. They are the plaintiffs in a frivolous lawsuit against you. They stopped being your parents the moment they filed that paperwork. This is war, Alexa, and you need to start acting like a soldier. Her words cut through the fog of my grief. She was right. They had made their choice. Now I had to make mine. I wasn't the scared 18-year-old anymore. I was a 31-year-old woman who had built a life for herself, brick by brick. They wanted to knock it down. They were going to find out just how strong my foundation really was. The next morning, armed with Chloe's advice and a fresh surge of adrenaline, I began my search for a lawyer. I didn't want someone who would be sympathetic. I wanted someone who would be a shark. I found him on the third try. His name was Marcus Thorne, and his website testimonials were filled with phrases like unflinching, relentless, and a bulldog in the courtroom. He was perfect. I sat in his sleek, modern office, the thick legal complaint lying on the polished desk between us. I told him the entire story, from the laptop to the dog collars to the final, devastating lawsuit. I expected him to be shocked. He wasn't. He leaned back in his leather chair, a grim, knowing look on his face. Ms. Alexa, he said, his voice a low baritone, I've been doing this for 20 years. You would not believe the things parents feel entitled to. This is, however, one of the more brazen attempts I've seen. Their claim of a verbal agreement is nonsense. And restitution for raising you isn't a legal concept. It's called being "A parent, they have a terrible case, so you think I can win?" I asked. A sliver of hope piercing my anxiety when he chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "We're going to dismantle them. We're going to make them regret ever thinking this was a good idea, but it's going to be unpleasant. You need to be prepared for that." He was right. The process was called discovery. And it was an excruciating journey through my own past. Marcus instructed me to gather every piece of financial documentation I had for the last 13 years. Bank statements, pay stubs, tax returns, old budgets scribbled in notebooks, even grocery receipts. Every evening after work, I would sit on the floor of my living room, surrounded by boxes of paper. Each document was a ghost of a past sacrifice. A statement showing a savings account balance of $47.50. A receipt for a week's worth of instant noodles. A spreadsheet meticulously tracking every single dollar I earned and spent. It was painful. But as I organized the papers into chronological binders, a new feeling emerged: pride. This wasn't just a pile of paper, it was a 13-year testament to my discipline and resilience. It was the evidence that would prove my case. While my parents' claim was built on a fantasy, my defense was built on cold, hard, documented facts. Meanwhile, the legal machine churned on. Marcus filed a blistering response to their lawsuit, calling their claims frivolous, baseless, and an abuse of the legal process. The court mandated a pre-trial mediation session. A last-ditch effort to settle things without a full hearing. We met in a sterile conference room. I hadn't seen my parents or Leo since that horrible day at my house. Seeing them walk in felt like a punch to the gut. They looked older, more tired. But their expressions were hard and resentful. They sat on the opposite side of the long table. Their own lawyer, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit, beside them. They refused to make eye contact with me. The mediator, a kind-faced woman, tried to find common ground. "This is a family matter," she began softly. "Surely we can find a resolution that avoids further pain." My parents' lawyer spoke up immediately. "Our position is clear. Our clients invested their lives in their daughter's future. They are now in a precarious financial position. While she is sitting on a significant asset made possible by their sacrifices, our initial demand for 50% of the property's value is more than fair." Marcus just smiled, a thin, predatory smile. "That's not a settlement offer, that's a joke. Your clients have no legal standing and you know it. They are trying to extort their own daughter because they gave their son a blank check for his hobbies. My client, Ms. Alexa, has spent 13 years living like a pauper to achieve a small piece of the dream. She owes them nothing." He then slid one of my binders across the table. "This is just one of 12 binders of financial records documenting every single dollar Ms. Alexa has earned and saved since she was 18. I invite you to find a single contribution from your clients. You won't." My father's face turned purple with rage. "This is an insult. We gave her a home, we fed her, we clothed her. You're describing the legal obligations of a parent." Marcus shot back calmly. "Not an investment. My client's counteroffer is this: you drop this ridiculous lawsuit immediately and she will not countersue you for legal fees and malicious prosecution. That offer is good for today only." My parents looked at their lawyer, expecting him to fight back. But I could see a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He had seen our evidence. He knew their case was a bluff, but my parents were too deep in their own narrative of victimhood. "We'll see you in court," my father snarled. The mediation was over. As they stood up to leave, my mother, Susan, finally looked at me. Her eyes were filled with a strange mix of hatred and desperation. "You are tearing this family apart," she whispered. Her voice venomous. "No," I said, my voice steady and clear. You just can't stand that I built something for myself without your help. And that drives you crazy." She recoiled as if I had slapped her. They left the room. And I was alone with Marcus. I was shaking, but I wasn't scared anymore. I was ready. Let them bring their lies to a courtroom. I would be waiting, armed with the truth. The day of the court hearing felt like the final scene of a movie I never wanted to be in. The courtroom was small and intimidating. All dark wood and high ceilings. I sat with Marcus at the defendant's table. Across the aisle, my parents and Leo sat with their lawyer. My father stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. My mother wrung her hands in her lap, occasionally dabbing her eyes with a tissue for effect. Leo just looked bored and resentful. It was surreal to see the people who were supposed to be my biggest protectors sitting on the opposing side, ready to tear me down. The hearing began, and my parents' lawyer, Mr. Davies, laid out their case. He painted a picture of a loving, sacrificial family who had poured all their resources into their children. He described me as a cold, calculating daughter who had benefited from their unwavering support, and then cruelly turned her back on them in their time of need. He used words like moral obligation and familial duty. It was a masterful performance, full of emotion and righteous indignation. It was also a complete work of fiction then. He called his first witness, my mother. Susan walked to the stand, looking frail and heartbroken. Mr. Davies led her through a series of questions designed to portray her as a devoted mother whose heart had been broken. Mrs. Susan, he asked gently, did you and your husband always encourage your daughter, Alexa? Oh, yes, she sniffled. We always told her she could be anything she wanted to be. We provided a stable, loving home. We never asked for anything in return. We just wanted her to be happy. And when she bought this expensive house, without telling you, how did that make you feel? Betrayed, she whispered, a single tear rolling down her cheek. We were in such trouble, and she was spending all this money on herself. We only asked for her to help us, her family. It was Marcus's turn to cross-examine. He walked toward the stand, his demeanor calm and methodical. Mrs. Susan, he began, you say you always supported Alexa. Do you recall an incident when she was 18? When she asked for help purchasing a laptop for her college courses? My mother shifted uncomfortably. I don't recall the specific details. Let me refresh your memory, Marcus said, pulling out a document. This is a copy of an email Alexa sent you, dated October 5th, 13 years ago, politely asking for a loan of $200. Do you remember your reply? It was important for her to learn to be responsible, Susan said defensively. Indeed. Marcus said, and do you recall, 1 week later, purchasing a brand new car for your son, Leo, for his 16th birthday at a cost of over $20,000? Mr. Davies shot to his feet. Objection. Relevance? It speaks directly to the plaintiff's claim of equitable support, Your Honor, Marcus countered. It establishes a clear, long-standing pattern of financial favoritism. Objection overruled, the judge said, looking at my mother with new interest. You may answer the question, Mrs. Susan. Susan stammered, well, that was different. He was just a boy, Marcus continued, relentless. He brought up the $20,000 investment. In the dog collar business, he asked about the money. For the food truck, he asked about the funds for Leo's gap year. With each question, my mother's composure crumbled, her narrative of the loving, equitable mother falling apart to reveal the truth of the biased enabler. My father's testimony was even more disastrous for their case. He was arrogant and combative on the stand, insisting that his verbal agreement with me was real. So, Mr. Richard, Marcus asked, can you tell the court exactly when this verbal agreement was made? It wasn't a single moment. My father blustered. It was an understanding throughout her entire life, an expectation. An expectation is not a contract, sir, Marcus stated flatly. Did Alexa ever say the words, I agree to give you a portion of my future assets in exchange for raising me? Well, not in those exact words, but yes or no, Mr. Richard. Did she ever explicitly agree to this? No, my father finally conceded, his voice full of venom. The final piece was my testimony. As I walked to the stand, my legs felt like jelly, but my mind was clear. Marcus had me walk the judge through my 13-year journey. I wasn't emotional or angry. I was factual. I spoke about my budget, my extra jobs, my diet of instant noodles. I presented the binders of evidence, the tangible proof of my sacrifice. Then, Marcus asked me the final question, Alexa, why was buying this house so important to you? I took a deep breath and looked at the judge. Your Honor, for my entire life, I felt like I was invisible to my own family. My accomplishments didn't matter, and my struggles were my own problem. I learned very early that if I wanted security or stability or a safety net, I would have to build it myself. That's what this house is. It's not just wood and plaster. It's 13 years of my life. It's my security. It's my peace. It's the only thing in the world that is truly mine, and I earned it. I dared a glance at my parents. My father was staring at the table, his face ashen. My mother was openly weeping, but this time, the tears looked real. For the first time, I think she understood what she had done. The judge didn't take long to make his ruling. He looked at my parents, his expression stern. In my years on the bench, he began, I have seen many family disputes, but this one is particularly troubling. Parental support is a gift, not a loan. To attempt to claw back that investment through a court of law is not only legally baseless, but it is a profound moral failure. He looked at the complaint. The plaintiffs have failed to provide a shred of credible evidence for their claims. This case is built on a foundation of entitlement and regret, not fact. I am dismissing this lawsuit in its entirety with prejudice. He banged his gavel. It was over. A wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled my knees washed over me. I had won. The sound of the gavel echoed in the silent courtroom. For a moment, nobody moved. The legal battle was over, but the emotional war had just ended, leaving a battlefield of wreckage in its wake. Mr. Davies was patting my father's shoulder, who looked like a broken man. Leo was already on his phone, likely complaining to someone. About the injustice of it all. My mother, Susan, stood up slowly. She looked across the aisle at me, her face a mess of tears and dawning horror. Her mouth opened and she took a step toward me, her hand outstretched. Alexa, she started, her voice a broken whisper, but Marcus put a firm, gentle hand on my arm. I looked at him and he just gave me a slight shake of his head. I understood. It was too late for apologies. The damage was done. The trust wasn't just broken. It had been systematically dismantled, lit on fire, and ground into dust. I gave her one last look, a look that held 13 years of disappointment and one final, painful goodbye. Then I turned and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. The days that followed were quiet. I half expected a final barrage of angry calls or tearful messages, but there was nothing. It was as if, with the judge's final word, the connection between us had been definitively severed. I took the final step myself. I blocked their numbers from my phone. I blocked their profiles on social media. It wasn't an act of anger, but of self-preservation. I needed to heal. And I couldn't do that with the door to their toxicity still cracked open. Coming back to my house was a different experience this time. It was no longer just a property I owned. It was a fortress I had defended. The air no longer felt empty, but filled with a quiet strength, my strength. The first thing I did was get rid of the air mattress. I went to a real furniture store and bought a real bed with a proper mattress and a beautiful wooden frame. I spent an entire weekend assembling it. And when I finally lay down on it that night, sinking into the comfortable mattress, I felt a sense of profound peace. This was my bed, in my bedroom, in my house. Slowly, I began to fill the empty spaces, not with expensive things, but with life. I bought a comfortable couch and a big, soft rug for the living room. Chloe came over and we spent a Saturday painting the walls a warm, cheerful color. We christened the kitchen by baking a ridiculously complicated cake and making a huge mess. We sat on the floor, eating cake straight from the pan with forks, and laughed until our sides hurt. I started a small garden in the backyard. I planted tomatoes, basil, and a row of bright yellow sunflowers. Tending to it became my therapy. Pushing my hands into the cool earth, nurturing these small plants, watching them grow under my care, it was a simple, powerful reminder that I could create life and beauty on my own terms. The scars of what my family did are still there. They're a part of my story now. Sometimes, late at night, a wave of sadness will wash over me for the family I wish I had. But the feeling no longer consumes me. It's a dull ache, not a gaping wound. My life is smaller now in some ways. My family consists of a few loyal friends like Chloe, but it's also bigger. My world is no longer defined by saving and sacrificing. It's defined by living. I can host a dinner party without calculating the cost per head. I can buy a plane ticket to visit a friend without feeling guilty. I can sit in my own backyard, on my own patio furniture, sipping a cup of coffee in the morning sun, and feel nothing but gratitude. They took me to court for buying a house, but in the end, they gave me a gift I never expected, my freedom. They forced me to finally stand up and claim my own life. They lost their lawsuit, but I won something far more valuable than property. I won myself. So, for anyone out there who feels invisible, who feels like their efforts go unnoticed, who is grinding away in silence toward a distant goal, don't give up. Build your foundation, brick by brick, and when you finally have something that is truly yours, protect it with everything you've got, because your peace is the most valuable thing you will ever own.